The complete work of Swami Vivekananda, video 42. 5. By the conquest of that comes light of knowledge. When one has succeeded in making this samyama, all powers come under his control. This is the great instrument of the yogi. The objects of knowledge are infinite, and they are divided into the gross, grosser, grossest, and the fine, finer, finest, and so on. This samyama should be first applied to gross things, and when you begin to get knowledge of this gross, slowly by stages it should be brought to finer things. 6. That should be employed in stages. This is a note of warning not to attempt to go too fast. 7. These three are more internal than those that precede. Before these we had the pratyahara, the pranayam, the asana, the yama and niyama. They are external parts of the three, dharana, dhyana and samadhi. When a man has attained to them, he may attain to omniscience and omnipotence, but that would not be salvation. These three would not make the mind nirvikalpa, changeless, but would leave the seeds for getting bodies again. Only when the seeds are, as the yogi says, fried, do they lose the possibility of producing further plants. These powers cannot fry the seed, but even they are external to the seedless samadhi. Compared with that seedless samadhi, therefore, even these are external. We have not yet reached the real samadhi, the highest, but a lower stage, in which this universe still exists as we see it, and in which are all these powers. Number 9. By the suppression of the disturbed impressions of the mind, and by the rise of impressions of control, the mind, which persists in that moment of control, is said to attain the controlling modifications. That is to say, in this first state of samadhi, the modifications of the mind have been controlled, but not perfectly, because if times were, there would be no modifications. If there is a modification which impels the mind to rush out through the senses, and the yogi tries to control it, that very control itself will be a modification. One wave will be checked by another wave, so it will not be real samadhi, in which all the waves subside, as control itself will be a wave. Yet this lower samadhi is very much nearer to the higher samadhi than when the mind comes bubbling out. 10. Its flow becomes steady by habit. The flow of this continuous control of the mind becomes steady when practiced day after day, and the mind obtains the faculty of constant concentration. Taking in all sorts of objects and concentrating upon one object, these two powers being destroyed and manifested respectively, the chitta gets the modification called samadhi. The mind takes up various objects, runs into all sorts of things. That is the lower state. There is a higher state of the mind when it takes up one object and excludes all other, of which samadhi is the result. Number 12. The one-pointedness of the chitta is when the impression that is past and that which is present are similar. How are we to know that the mind has become concentrated? Because the idea of time will vanish. The more time passes unnoticed, the more concentrated we are. In common life, we see that when we are interested in a book, we do not note the time at all. And when we leave the book, we are often surprised to find how many hours have passed. All time will have the tendency to come and stand in the one present. So the definition is given: when the past and present come and stand in one, the mind is said to be concentrated. Number 13. By this is explained the threefold transformation of form, time and state, in fine or gross matter, and in the organs. By the threefold changes in the mind stuff as to form, time and state are explained the corresponding changes in gross and subtle matter and in the organs. Suppose there is a lump of gold. It is transformed into a bracelet and again into an earring. These are changes as to form. The same phenomena looked at from the standpoint of time give us changes as to time. Again, the bracelet or the earring may be bright or dull, thick or thin, and so on. This is change as to state. Now, referring to the aphorism 9, 11, and 12, the mind stuff is changing into riddhis. This is change as to form. That it passes through past, present, and future moments of time is change as to time. That the impressions vary as to intensity within one particular period, say present, is change as to state. The concentrations taught in the preceding aphorisms were to give the yogi a voluntary control over the transformations of his mind stuff, which alone will enable him to make the samyama named in.